I jolted awake, drenched in cold sweat, heart pounding. My mind was racing, panic setting in fast, thick and suffocating. It was just a dream, there's still time. I can make it, if I haul serious ass. I thought to myself, you can do this. You can do this. Lisa! Then it hit me. Oh shit, do I even have enough gas to get to campus? A wave of regret crashed over me. Why the hell did I only put 80 cents in the tank last night? I could already see my whole future going up in fumes. And the tire, don't even get me started on the rear tire. That slow, traitorous leak might force me into the overpriced jaws of that cursed Quickie Mart gas station where the air pump costs $2, which I definitely did not have. Shit, 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 I muttered, this time out loud. A deep frown etched across my face, brows knit so tightly it felt like my skin might tear. My jaw clenched, muscles rigid and aching. One knee twitched uncontrollably. Truth be told, I'd already waved the white flag on higher education. Instead of powering through 2 more hours of last-minute studying, I'd thrown in the towel, whispering a defeated fuck it as I rolled over and let sleep take me. It was a deep, dreamless sleep at first, then evolved into a dark velvet abyss where exhaustion wrapped me up like a warm blanket, but just as I was sinking into REM sleep, that's when it struck. The nightmare. Crawling out from the murky depths of my subconscious like some ancient thing with too many eyes and no mercy. It didn't knock. It didn't ask permission, it burst in. So there I was, taking an afternoon nap passed out cold in the middle of what should have been my midterm finals, dreaming the kind of nightmare that doesn't need monsters because in that case real life was the monster. In the dream, I was 40 years old, still waiting tables, still fake smiling at customers who asked for gluten-free water. And let me tell you, no mutant lizard with 7 eyeballs and a mouth full of steak knives ever terrified me as much as that vision of eternal restaurant servitude. I woke up in a panic, launched myself out of my cockroach-infested, overpriced studio apartment. I jumped on my brave little 49 cubic centimeter scooter, also known as the Mosquito, said a prayer, and hoped it would get me to my community college without exploding. I had 2 finals that day, Introduction to the Internet. This was the mid-90s. Mind you, when people thought America Online was witchcraft, and Remedial Mathematics 060, which is community college lingo for algebra you should have learned in the 9th grade, but somehow didn't, and because the high school I attended somehow made a way for me to graduate, I managed to survive. And let me tell you, it was all worth it when right out of high school I landed my first job at this hokey little restaurant that had been in business longer than I have been alive. Now by some miracle or act of God, or maybe just because the universe enjoys watching people squirm, I actually made it to class on time and passed both finals. Despite running on fumes, a rear tire held together by sheer delusion, and the ever-looming threat of flying off that scooter. Now, this is the part where I should say that triumph lit a fire under my ass. That I got my act together, finished my associate's degree in business administration, but no. That would be a lie. So bold it might actually qualify as performance art. The truth? That caffeine-laced, anxiety-soaked, scooter-rattling disaster of a day? It was all for nothing. There was no grand comeback, no 2-year degree framed on the wall. Just a scarred memory and the slow, gnawing realization that sometimes, even your most desperate efforts only buy you a little more time in the same losing game. I made it back to the Palace of Despair, also known as my apartment, with a solid 2 hours before I had to report back to hell. And by hell, I mean my soul-sucking job where dignity goes to die somewhere between the walk-in freezer and the soda machine. What should I do with this precious window of freedom? Take a nap? Absolutely not after the last one. And right then, because the universe has a cruel sense of timing, the phone rang. I wasn't going to answer at first, that's what the answering machine was for. Odds were, it was a bill collector, or some emotionally draining caller from the past, or worse, a cheerful person. My potential ESP told me to go with the latter. There was really only one person I wanted to hear from, and please, don't accuse me of being clairvoyant, but somehow, I knew, it was Sophia. Calling to lift me out of this bottomless pit of despair, and, miracle of miracles, she actually had good news. Spoiler alert, it would be the only good news I got on what was rapidly becoming the day from hell. "Hello," I said, trying my best to put my best fake smile in my voice.
"Hey, Lisa."
She chirped, her voice bubbling with the kind of cheer that made me both hopeful and emotionally suspicious. "Hi, Soapy," I replied. She's my bestie, so I get to call her Soapy, even if it sounds like a discontinued brand of bubble bath. My voice, on the other hand, was trembling with barely contained anxiety. She teased,
"Now don't you go sounding all somber. I come bearing good news."
Hope tried to rise inside me, like a faint flicker of light in the middle of a dark cave. "Did I get it?" I asked, already bracing for disappointment. Keep in mind, I'm usually optimistic and full of good cheer, but at this point, life was kicking my ass, and I knew it was only going to get worse.
"Oh yes, you did.
She beamed.
And not only that, I've got your shiny new employee badge and your pre-employment paperwork right here. If all goes well, tonight will be your final soul-crushing shift of kissing customer ass and watching your income crawl in $2 at a time."
Now, for a fleeting moment, the day actually held some hope. But, naturally, that didn't last. Things didn't just go downhill, they took a swan dive off a cliff and landed squarely in the twilight zone. Once again, it was time to mount the trusty mosquito and brave the elements. I'm happy to report that after my finals, I finally took care of the fuel situation and even filled up the tire. That's the one great thing about riding a 49 cubic centimeter scooter. $3 gets you a full tank and a fleeting sense of control over your life. But, as always, progress demands sacrifice. And this time, the toll would be paid in weather. I wish I could say it was just raining cats and dogs, but no, this was biblical. It was raining frogs and fish. And no, this isn't some sleep-deprived hallucination or leftover nightmare, this actually happened. Apparently, there's a scientific explanation involving a waterspout or some freak tornado that yanked up a bunch of unsuspecting pond life and then let gravity finish the job. All I know is, 1 second I'm cruising along, and the next a small fish ricochets off the back window of a Honda hatchback and slaps me square in the face. I almost wiped on the mosquito right there, death by fish to the face, which is not exactly how I pictured going out. Like I mentioned before, this day was just getting weirder and weirder. All I know is, 1 second I'm cruising along, and the next a small fish ricochets off the back window of a Honda hatchback and slaps me square in the face. I almost wiped on the mosquito right there, death by fish to the face, which is not exactly how I pictured going out. But thankfully, I made it to work, soaked, mildly traumatized, and still slightly smelling of fish. And there was Sophia, my ride-or-die bestie, waiting to greet me like the patron saint of second chances. She was the kind of effortlessly radiant person who could make even a government building feel less soul-crushing. Long, curly blonde hair, an infectious smile, and those striking baby blue eyes that had a way of lifting anyone, man or woman, out of despair. In her hands, my shiny new postal employee badge and a stack of pre-employment paperwork. You see, Soapy had been working for the post office ever since high school and, by some divine loophole, had become the hiring supervisor despite the path toward addiction that we both seemed to be on. We were just waiting for the final green light from corporate, she told me. Meanwhile, I was nervously sweating that little weed charge from back in '95. Nothing like a minor brush with the law haunting your dreams of government employment. So after receiving confirmation of the good news, it was time to start my shift. So, as always, my shift began in the employee restroom, a space 2 sizes too small and 3 decades past due for a renovation. It barely had enough room for one. It smelled like broken dreams and lemon-scented lies. A citrusy cover-up for mildew, sweat, and desperation. That's where I'd squeeze myself into this hokey little dress, a near miniskirt patterned with tiny red and blue flowers, tangled in delicate paisley swirls. I wouldn't be caught dead wearing outside of work. Anyway, as I was mentally preparing to sell my dignity by the hour, my eyes landed on something unusual just lounging in the corner of the women's restroom like it owned the place, a Kevlar vest. Not just any Kevlar vest, this one was clearly issued by the Grand Island Sheriff's Department, complete with faded tan and green coloring and bold block letters screaming, Grand Island Sheriff's Department. Naturally, my first thought wasn't, why the hell is this in here? This might be evidence in an ongoing investigation. No, the more pressing thought was, I bet this baby could fetch a decent price at the pawn shop. Which would be oh so helpful, considering I'm in the middle of switching occupations. So, into my duffel bag it went, like a morally questionable magic trick. But before I committed to full concealment, I checked every pocket like who knows? Maybe I'd get lucky and find a badge, a half-eaten donut, or at least some spare ammo to complete the ensemble. And what did I find, you might be wondering? In the small pocket on the upper left-hand side was a little tan envelope labeled evidence. Oh yes, I said to myself. Hello, what could this be? Wasting no time in discovering what hidden wonders that envelope might hold. 4 little white pills. One side stamped with the number 4, the other with the letter D. My mind started racing, excitement creeping in slowly. Could this be what I think it is? No sense getting my hopes up prematurely, I said to myself, time to verify. I made my way to the employee phone tucked away in a more private corner, back when landlines were still a thing, and called Poison Control to do a quick cross-reference. Once I confirmed the ID, my attitude took a sharp turn for the better. Not just dilaudid, but the strongest version they made. 4 milligrams per pill. Jackpot. I wasted no time and popped those little white wonders into my mouth and swallowed with no water, feeling like a pill-popping pro. Then it was time to start working. I headed to the dining room and reported to my shift manager, making sure to show him that I was in full, clean uniform and had brought my own bank. That part had always rubbed me the wrong way. As servers, we were expected to always have change on hand for customers, which meant I could never actually spend all of my tips. I had to keep at least $40 set aside at all times, like a little emergency fund, for the guests and the restaurant managers. Convenience, of course. This was on top of being paid less than minimum wage, because apparently the assumption was that tips would somehow make everything fair and balanced. And then there was tip share, which had nothing to do with how hard you worked or how many tables you ran. No, it was based solely on your total food and drink sales. So even if you were the one sprinting through weeds every night, hi, that was me, your cut got carved up just the same. After my first turn of tables, break time. Finally, a well-earned cigarette. I headed to the employee break room, back when smoking indoors was not punishable by death. Sophia was already there, puffing on a Newport menthol. Did you just come from the salon? I asked, though I already knew the answer. She looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine spread. Her long golden blonde braids, freshly colored and impossibly glossy, were flawlessly arranged to frame her face, the kind of face that could stop traffic, or at the very least, earn her a free drink at any bar in the state. Smooth, symmetrical, and just shy of haunting in how perfect it was. Her braids cascaded down her shoulders and met at the ends in a bold, cherry red ribbon. She had just launched into some morbid story about what happened with her first table that night before I quickly cut her off.
Didn't you notice the paramedics here a little while ago?
All chipper like she was talking about a flash sale at Sephora. She asked. Didn't you see it was raining fish this afternoon? I shot back without even taking a breath. I'm serious, Soapy, it was raining fish and frogs. You didn't notice? Sophia glanced over her shoulder.
You're on crack.
She said. No, but close, I replied.
What's that supposed to mean?
She asked, her tone displayed puzzled curiosity. Never mind, I said quickly, waving it off and diving back into my story. As I was saying, I was cruising down South Locust Street on the Mosquito. At first, everything seemed normal, but something about the day still felt off. Like the sky itself was watching. Then the last thing I ever expected happened. There was a loud thwack, something smacked the rear window of the Honda Civic just ahead of me. Before I could even process it. A fish. An honest-to-God fish bounced off the glass, spun through the air in a wet, glittering arc, and nailed me square in the face. The impact stung. I yelped, jerked the handlebars hard to the left, and the Mosquito wobbled violently, tires skimming the center line. For a second, I thought I was going to lose it and fly into oncoming traffic. But I wrestled the scooter back under control, my heart pounding, the fish flopping pitifully to the pavement behind me. I sat there in stunned silence for a beat, fish guts on my cheek, heart pounding. I swear to God, this day just keeps getting weirder, I muttered. Look at my face, seriously. It's all red and starting to swell. What the hell is happening today? Then Sophia cut in.
Talk about weird, and I do believe you, by the way. I think I saw something about that on the Discovery Channel, anyway.
She continued.
I don't know how you possibly missed all the commotion. There was this middle-aged guy, not bad looking, by the way, salt and pepper hair, super symmetrical face, like, chiseled.
I interrupted. Get on with the story, break's almost over.
Oh yeah.
She said.
So he's here with his family, and all of a sudden he clutches his chest with both hands and falls out of his chair. Just hits the floor, curled up in the fetal position. At least half the dining room saw it. There must have been a dozen. 911 calls. You know how the well-to-do dinner crowd is. Everyone's got those fancy mobile phones. So get this, the paramedics come and whisk him off to the hospital. The docs say it was just a panic attack, or indigestion. So then Bobby, you know, the busboy.
Oh, trust me, I know who my cousin is, I said, dragging out each word and enunciating them like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Thanks for the reminder, though. Really helpful. She brushed off my sarcasm and went on.
So, he picks the guy up from the hospital and brings him back to finish dinner. And then bam, he collapses again. Only this time, he's dead. Paramedics had to come back. How could you possibly miss all this?
She demanded. I had a pretty good idea, but I kept it to myself. She ended the story with a smirk.
I think there's gonna be one hell of a lawsuit after this.
I was just wondering how well the family of the deceased tipped, but I didn't ask. That's the last thing I remember from my shift that night. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in the back of a police car, curled up on the floorboard. Wedged behind the driver and passenger seats, as if I'd somehow slipped in there unnoticed, the space was cramped, and the faint smell of urine and vomit hit me as soon as I stirred. How the hell did I end up here? I thought, then it hit me, the bulletproof vest. Could I have been arrested for taking it, and why don't I remember anything? I thought to myself. We were driving, leaving town. I could tell by the rhythm of the road and the silence that creeps in when the city fades behind you. I stayed crouched, holding on to this thin hope that maybe I hadn't been noticed. The cruiser rolled steadily toward the outskirts of town. I stayed as low as I could, hoping. Maybe, just maybe, they hadn't realized I was back here. But when the car finally stopped, I realized how wrong I was. The female officer stepped out, opened the back door, and looked down at me with an expression that said it all. She had known I was there the entire time. Standing there was the cop. Except, she didn't look like a cop. Not like any I'd ever seen. She wasn't the typical hard-edged, tomboy bully stereotype either. She was striking, athletic, yeah, but curvy too, with that kind of confidence that didn't need a uniform to be intimidating. Her red bob had this deep burgundy tint, like something out of a 1920s speakeasy. Stylish. Sharp. Like she belonged. In a noir film, not a patrol car, any doubt that she'd noticed me vanished when she spoke, cool as ice, with a distinctly recognizable Southern Belle accent.
Please step out and put your hands behind your back.
Oh shit, I thought. This is really happening. What the hell for? I snapped. I don't even know how the hell I ended up in your cruiser. Did it sprout arms and legs and drag me in? She didn't laugh. She didn't even blink. She just said,
How much have you had to drink tonight?
"Oh, please," I said, my voice rising. "I know I'm not drunk. I haven't had so much as a sip tonight." Was that true? Honestly, I wasn't sure. I kept slipping in and out of reality like someone had cut a few scenes from my evening. Some of the blank, not all of them had filled in by now. Maybe it was the crisp night air, or maybe the fact that I was mentally starting to piece things together. Then it hit me. The pills. Well, duh. No brainer there. Whatever the cause, my memory was sharpening by the minute, but I still felt far from sober. It was nothing like the dilaudid I remembered. I rolled my eyes and didn't bother to hide it, and then I continued to speak even louder this time. But sure, let's pretend I'm the problem. And that was it. She stepped forward and clicked the handcuffs on like she'd done it 1,000 times. No warning. No hesitation. Just cold, mechanical efficiency. I twisted my wrists slightly, feeling the cold metal. What for? I demanded. Again, my voice rising. I already told you, I haven't had anything to drink tonight. Silence. She didn't even look at me. Just tilted her head slightly as a burst of static crackled from the shoulder-mounted walkie.
Unit 9. Status.
She pressed the button and responded in a flat, unreadable tone, words I couldn't quite catch. Then, without another word to me, she slipped back into the driver's seat of her cruiser and shut the door. I stood there. Still cuffed. Outside the car. Watching her. Waiting for something. And me, I was just standing on the side of the road, hands behind my back, looking like an idiot. I don't know if she was distracted or if it was intentional. Maybe it was a test. Maybe she was just bad at multitasking, but when she cuffed me, she left them incredibly loose. And when I say loose, I mean loose. So naturally, I slipped my hands out. I mean, wouldn't you? At that exact moment, she was busy taking a call in her cruiser, probably ordering lunch, checking her fantasy football lineup, or, hell, maybe even ordering an 8-ball from her dealer. Because the more I thought about it, the more I started to seriously question whether this chick was even a real cop. That's when I found myself at a crossroads. Do I quietly slip the cuffs back on and pretend like nothing happened? Or, do I make a run for it? Second spoiler alert, I chose the wrong one. I ran for it. Just a few yards away, way too close for comfort, an old cemetery sat directly across from the detox center, like some grim afterthought. Separating the two properties was a narrow, time-worn lane, not even a real road, more like a forgotten carriage path. The stones were uneven and cracked, moss growing between them, slick with rain and age. It looked like something out of a ghost town postcard, if ghost towns handed out warnings instead of souvenirs. I thought I could lose her in the dark. I thought the cemetery might swallow me whole, or give me a place to hide. Turns out, I was just running straight into something worse. Graves blurred past as I ran, the twisted headstones rising up like jagged fingers in the dark, grasping at my ankles with every misstep. The wet grass was slick beneath my shoes, the mud sucking at my feet like it didn't want me to leave. Branches overhead clawed at my arms as I stumbled between leaning trees and mausoleums that looked older than the town itself. Behind me, I could hear her each footstep impossibly light, impossibly fast. She wasn't panting. She wasn't even struggling. She was calm. Controlled. Too controlled. I had only just gained a head start. It wouldn't be enough. I dove into the tall, wet grass beside a statue, an angel, towering and cracked clean in half. The unbroken side swept moss. The shattered side smiled. Perfect. Creepy. The wet tall grass was just tall enough to hide me. I lay flat on my back. Breath caught in my throat, praying that she would pass me by. She didn't pass me by, instead she stopped, just mere feet away from me. Her flashlight cut through the dark, sweeping side to side, the beam skimming just inches above my head. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I was sure I was caught. But if this was the end, I'd make her find me. She stepped closer. She put her foot down within an inch of my head, so close I could smell the new leather on her boots. Just one more step, or a slight tilt of her flashlight. It would be over. That was all it would take. My heart slammed against my ribs, so loud I was sure she could hear it. Still, I didn't move. Didn't breathe. Didn't even blink. Then, she paused. Tilted her head and slowly, almost reluctantly, she turned away. One step. Then another. She was moving. Away. Still not safe. Not yet. I stayed frozen, lungs burning, whispering silent prayers into the dirt. Keep walking. Please just keep walking. I sat there for a moment, frozen, until I was sure she'd moved far enough away. Only then did I quietly crawl out from behind the statue, every muscle tight with fear, and slip deeper into the cemetery. I wasn't taking any chances. I needed to be damn sure I gave her the slip. Once I was confident she was gone, I rose to my feet and began stumbling through the dark graveyard, doing my best to create as much distance as possible. Every step felt heavier, like the ground itself was reluctant to let me go. This had to be the creepiest place on earth. Some graves had caved in slightly, the earth sunken and disturbed, as if something beneath had shifted, or worse, clawed its way closer to the surface. As if that wasn't unsettling enough, the wind had picked up, howling through the crooked trees and broken stones, carrying with it a faint, otherworldly moaning. It sounded like the lost souls buried there hadn't yet come to terms with their own deaths, trapped in a limbo between the world they left behind and one that waited with open arms and no mercy. A place of final, crushing despair. A place beyond hope, where even the dead feared to go. The storm hadn't let up. Thunder cracked across the sky like some angry god was splitting the heavens open, shaking the air with its fury. Rain sheeted down in cold, relentless waves, and each flash of lightning lit up the graveyard in harsh, bone-white flickers, brief, stuttering glimpses of a world the living weren't meant to see. I kept pushing forward, moving in the same direction, trying to get further away from Miss Pretend a Cop. The cemetery began to thin out, and soon I reached the outskirts. There, looming in the darkness, was an old, rusted iron fence, about 8 feet high, its bars thick and pitted with age. Every foot or so, a spear-like tip jutted upward, jagged and menacing, like it was never meant to keep people out, but to keep something in. I thought to myself, I can do this. With a quick glance behind me, I grabbed the cold metal and began to climb. My fingers slipped slightly on the damp surface, but I managed to get a solid grip. I hauled myself upward, foot by foot, until I reached the top. I swung one leg over, carefully maneuvering past the sharp points, praying I wouldn't slip and end up impaled. Then, just as I was about to throw the other leg over, something yanked at my pant leg. Hard, I nearly lost my balance, my body pitching forward. A quiet, stern voice drifted up from below.
We can do this the hard way or the easy way. Don't make me yank you off this fence, you might get hurt.
It was her. I was caught. Panic surged through me like lightning. I didn't think, I reacted. With one leg still hooked over the top of the fence and her grip like iron around my ankle, I twisted and kicked back, aiming blindly. My boot connected with something solid, her arm, maybe her face. She let out a low grunt. Not pain. Just annoyance, but it was enough. Her grip slipped. I didn't hesitate. Tall, rusted, and crooked with age. Its sharp, spiked tips jutted toward the sky, and the iron bars were slick with moisture and patches of moss. Time had warped it, bent some of the vertical slats just enough to offer the illusion of escape. But the gaps were narrow, unforgiving. And the entire structure groaned when touched, as if protesting the idea of being crossed. I took a deep breath, tried to brace for impact, and then quickly leaped off the tall cold metal bars. I was airborne for a fraction of a second and landed on the ground hard. I then felt a shock of intense jarring pain travel up my ankles, but I quickly recovered. I sprang back into action while watching her climbing the other side in quick pursuit. Again, I managed a small head start. I pushed deeper into the woods, feet slipping on wet leaves and mud, heart threatening to bust through my ribs. Feeling every branch that whipped across my face, every root that tried to trip me felt like the forest itself was on the hunt. Somewhere behind me, I heard the soft thud of her landing on the other side of the fence. Not a crash. Just deliberate. I cursed under my breath and forced my legs to keep moving, ducking under a fallen tree, weaving through underbrush. I nearly fell, twice. My breath came in shallow gasps, throat raw, chest heaving. I couldn't keep this pace up. But stopping wasn't an option. Then I saw it, a narrow trail, almost hidden in the gloom, snaking off to the left. Without thinking, I veered toward it, hoping it might lead to a road or a house, anything. I followed it blindly, branches scraping my arms. Branches and roots tearing into my exposed calves, but the sound of her behind me never faded. She wasn't losing ground, I was. Suddenly, my foot hit something uneven, a stone, maybe a half-buried root, and I went down hard. A jolt of pain tore through me, sharp, blinding, and instant. It was like fire had exploded behind my eyes. My ankle twisted awkwardly beneath me, sending a sharp bolt of pain up my leg. I cried out before I could stop myself. That was all it took. A second later, she was on me. I felt the weight first, one knee in my back, a hand grabbing my wrist, twisting it behind me before I could even think about fighting back. She was fast, practiced. Not just pretending.
I told you not to run,
She said. Voice low, calm, infuriatingly patient.
but you just had to make this difficult, didn't you?
I bucked, twisted, tried to break free, but she held firm. Her grip tightened, just enough to make a point. Let go of me. I shouted, gasping for air, throat raw with panic.
I'm trying to help you.
She said, and there was something almost regretful in her tone.
But if you keep fighting me, you're going to end up worse than hurt.
I froze, not because of her words, but because of how she said them. Like she knew something I didn't. Like this wasn't about a chase anymore, like I wasn't the only one being hunted. I braced myself, half expecting to be slapped, tossed, or possibly vaporized. But to my absolute shock and confusion, she didn't do any of that. Instead of saying nothing, she spoke calmly. Almost motherly.
Sweetie,
She said, in a soft, soothing tone that made my skin crawl.
I just know you've had way too much to drink tonight. And didn't your mama ever warn you not to run from the police?
Police? I thought to myself. Yeah, right, and I'm the Pope. She tilted her head, smiling like she was in on a joke I didn't get.
You're lucky I'm in a good mood today.
She said, her voice dropping just enough to make my spine stiffen.
Or I might have had to resort to more extreme measures.
Then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, she reached down to her belt and pulled out a pair of backup cuffs, slow and deliberate. She didn't rush. No threats. No force. Just a quiet, practiced precision. She made sure they were tighter this time, too. Careful not to make the same mistake twice. And then, just like that, she started walking me back toward the red-bricked building. The same one I had run from like my life depended on it.
I'm only trying to help you.
She said in that same eerily calm tone.
You being under the influence and all, you're a danger to yourself and others.
That was it. I stopped in my tracks and spun around, the fury inside me finally boiling over. Are you deaf or just stupid? I shouted, my voice echoing off the damp stone walls. I told you, I haven't had anything to drink. By the time the words left my mouth, we were standing once again at the entrance to the so-called detox center. The door loomed in front of us, tall and silent, like it had been waiting the whole time. Her voice echoed off the street.
Well, darling,
She said with a patient little smile.
why don't you just blow into this device and let it be the judge?
I agreed, mostly because I didn't have a better idea. Okay, I said, halfway nervous about what it might say. She held out the little black box like it was a party favor and I blew. She turned the screen toward me and it read .16.
Well, these here breathalyzers, they don't lie.
She said, her tone weirdly cheerful.
And they're completely unbiased.
Unbiased, huh? That's a big word for someone who just kidnapped me.
Kidnapped you?
She echoed, trying, and failing, to mimic my voice.
Sweetheart, you broke the law. I'm just doing my job, you know.
She continued, still smiling.
Now, I just need you to go on into this detox center here until you can blow less than the legal limit. That's 0.08. You should be good to go in about 8 hours.
Even in my state, I could tell that was a lie, the building itself. Well, that was the real warning sign. From a distance, the building looked mostly unassuming, just another forgotten relic on the edge of nowhere, the kind of place you wouldn't even register unless someone pointed directly at it and said, that one. Right there. But up close, something was off. Not in a jump scare, horror movie kind of way, no, this was worse. It was the kind of wrong that seeps in quietly and slowly. Consumes you with doubt and fear. You don't notice it right away, but your instincts do. Somewhere deep in your bones, you feel it whisper, you're not supposed to be here, and that door, oversized, too tall, too narrow. Its paint had long since peeled away, revealing dark wood beneath, etched with more of those carvings. They twisted together in a way that suggested meaning, but not one you wanted to understand. The windows were impossibly narrow, like they'd been designed to keep people from seeing in or crawling out, or screaming out. Some of them were covered from the inside with stained curtains or warped blinds that didn't quite close all the way. Others just showed blackness, not darkness, blackness. A true sentient type of blackness like someone had painted over the glass. I definitely didn't want to go in, but free will wasn't on the table. I'm starting to think that the imposter of a cop moonlighted as a psychic, or just really enjoys screwing with people, because before I could even open my mouth, she smiled and said,
You don't have a choice, sweetie. Just 8 tiny little hours and you'll be out of here.
like prison time was a nap and she was tucking me in. But I wasn't buying. Somehow I knew this place would be my doom. She was right, I didn't have a choice, so through the gates of hell I went. After stepping through the front door, the place looked almost normal. Then I saw him, the male receptionist. And man, was he something. Tall, slender, with just enough muscle to make it feel like he casually worked out 6 days a week. His dark, shoulder-length hair looked like it had been styled by a team of tiny salon elves. Honestly, the moment I clocked him, my gaydar didn't just ping, it set off a damn air raid siren, which, of course, tracks. Most guys I consider a decent catch tend to play for the other team. He wasn't lacking in the personality department either, charming, polite. With that warm, disarming smile that screamed, I have better skin care than you, and when I noticed how flawlessly put together he was, nails buffed, shirt pressed within an inch of its life, and not a single hair out of place, I didn't even need confirmation at that point. I just thought, yep. Gay. Undeniably, devastatingly gay. What a shame. But just as I was spiraling into that hopeless little daydream, I got yanked back to reality and remembered exactly where I was. That guy wasn't there by accident. No, he was strategically placed to put people like me at ease. Polished bait for the emotionally unstable. At least that was my first impression of him. Now I'm officially inside the so-called detox center, which, on the surface, looks suspiciously normal. Too normal. The place is drowned in white walls and sterile silence, all lit up like a crime scene under a migraine-inducing number of fluorescent lights. As I shuffle down the initial corridor, the door behind me slams shut with a metallic clank, the kind of sound that says, "You're not leaving anytime soon." Lovely. That creeping sense of doom? Now in overdrive, before I can finish internally screaming. I'm swiftly ushered toward triage reception by Ray, as he proudly introduces himself. Enter Ray, gay Ray, I think to myself, as he casually offers, clearly not his first rodeo. He's absurdly polite, impossibly non-threatening, and just the right amount of cheerfully dead inside to make me think he's either heavily medicated, storing bodies, or running a secret spa for oiled-down muscular men in the break room. Honestly, I respected the mystery. I went through all the routine motions of being admitted to the detox center. A nurse, normal enough at first glance. She was older, her blonde hair pinned up in a tidy bun that looked like something straight out of the 1960s. Her uniform was spotless, almost too pristine, like it had never been touched by a real emergency. Her face was pale, just enough to notice. Not sickly, but close, like she hovered on the edge of anemia. There was something off about her coloring, her stillness. But nothing overt. Just enough to raise the tiniest hair on the back of my neck. Something you wouldn't consciously register until later, when it was already too late. She asked me.
"What's your drug of choice?"
"None," I snapped, sharper than a blade. "I shouldn't even be here. What the hell kind of detox center is this, anyway?" I barked, the words spilling out like poison. That Barbie doll wannabe, a cheap knockoff of a cop, kidnapped me. So how about you do your actual job and call the real police? The so-called female cop was still standing there, arms crossed, probably counting the minutes until she could taser me or something. I was angry, scared, and not holding back a damn thing. The detox nurse, though? She didn't even flinch. She just gave me that bored, dead-eyed stare and said,
"Just try to relax. We have to take your vitals and I need to administer a urine analysis."
Like we were talking about the weather or something. Didn't you hear a damn word I said? I was vibrating with rage. I was kidnapped by this bitch pretending to be a cop.
"Right this way, please."
Then Barbie cop spoke up, her voice all sweet venom.
If I take those off, are you gonna behave?
She meant the handcuffs, obviously. At that point, reality finally slammed down on me. Fighting wasn't going to do a damn thing. Yes. Except make it worse. Yes, I'll behave, I muttered, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. She took off the cuffs without a word and finally headed out, leaving me alone with Mrs. Frankenstein, the triage nurse, who was either part of the conspiracy or just another soulless cog in this twisted machine. She moved with quiet precision, her hands cold but steady as she took my vitals, asked a series of routine questions, and administered a UA. Then came another breathalyzer. I obliged, trying not to slur. When the machine beeped, she gave a slight tilt of her head, reading the number. 0.016. Still breathing alcohol. I blinked. How the hell? I hadn't had a drink, at least, not one I could remember. My head throbbed dully, as if my memories had been washed in bleach. She didn't react. No judgment. No surprise, just a glance at me, quick, clinical, then a step back, smooth and controlled. That same measured pace, like she was following a script. Less human now. More, procedural.
Now, let's get you something dry to wear.
She said, her voice calm, almost gentle, but distant in a way that made my skin crawl. She led me down a narrow hallway to a small, windowless closet, too clean, too quiet. She reached inside without hesitation and pulled out a neatly folded light blue garment. Thin material. Uniform, almost.
Put these on.
She said.
You feel so much better.
There was no warmth behind the words, just efficiency. As if this part had been rehearsed 100 times before. I didn't argue. I was still freezing, clothes damp and clinging to my skin like ice-soaked rags. My fingers trembled slightly. As I took the garment, whatever this place was, whatever she was, comforting me wasn't really the point, but I changed anyway. Because I was cold. And because something told me that not cooperating might make things worse. She guided me down a dim hallway without another word, her steps steady, unhurried. As we walked, she said, almost casually,
We'll see about getting you a shower a little later.
There was something about the way she said it, like it wasn't really a promise. More like a checkpoint in some silent, prearranged sequence. The lighting shifted as we moved, almost imperceptibly at first, then more deliberately. Warmer tones gave way to a colder, more clinical glow. The overhead fluorescents buzzed faintly, casting long, sterile shadows on the floor. It felt less like walking through a building and more like being led deeper into something calculated. Something that didn't expect you to leave. Something that didn't want to be questioned. We stopped in front of a door. She opened it. It was a sleeping bay, clearly, but not a normal one. Too big. Too quiet. Too clean. Rows of empty beds stretched into the distance like a graveyard of forgotten patients. And the biggest red flag? I was the only one there. In a chamber built to house dozens, maybe more. I was completely, terrifyingly alone. Each bed was barely big enough for a grown adult. 6 feet long, 2 feet wide. 18 inches of vertical space. Just enough to lie flat. Barely enough room to turn over. Claustrophobic. Inhuman. A place for bodies, not people. She pointed silently to a bed near the bottom of the far wall. I hesitated. My gut twisted. Something screamed at me to run. But my legs moved forward on their own, numbed by exhaustion, by confusion, by the thick fog of whatever was already setting in. I climbed into my designated bed. With a sharp mechanical hiss, cold metal restraints clamped over my wrists and ankles, yanking them down with surgical precision. I gasped, too stunned to scream. The restraints were snug, too snug. I tried to lift my hands, but they wouldn't budge. Then the glass rose. The bed locked me in. From the foot of the bed, a transparent barrier began to rise, smooth, slow, final, until it sealed me in like a specimen. Like something to be observed. Studied. Contained. What the hell? I screamed. Oh my God, oh my God. For a moment, I was convinced they were trying to kill me, suffocate me, right there in plain sight, but then I realized I could still breathe. The air was thin, clinical, but breathable. My panic shifted, not gone, just mutated. I wasn't relieved. I was nauseous, dizzy, completely disoriented. Whatever this was, I was still miles away from okay. Now I knew I was screwed, for real this time, and the last scraps of hope were slipping through my fingers like smoke. How the hell am I gonna get out of this? I thought, panic chewing at the edges of my mind. That's when it hit me. A sharp, pinpoint jab deep in the meat of my hip. Fast. Precise. Almost mechanical. I jerked, instinct kicking in, but it was already too late. A heavy, syrupy wave tried to crash over me, pulling me under. What the hell? I slurred, my limbs heavy but my brain still grinding away. I was starting to drift, but not fast enough. Not the way they expected. They must have had hypodermic needles that rose automatically from the damn bed frame, silent. Hidden, waiting, and the restraints, metal cuffs that somehow knew exactly where my wrists and ankles were. Like they'd mapped my body in advance. This wasn't a hospital. This was not a detox. It was a high-tech prison, designed by some depraved mind straight from the bottommost pit of hell.
This is the end of part 1. Thanks for listening.